Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Today we'll be talking about home birthing in Portugal, and the guest today will be sharing her story will be Meghan. She's a brave mother of three, all of which are under 3.5 years old. Wow. Welcome, Meghan. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you came from, and then how'd you migrate to Portugal?
Yeah, I'm American, born in Phoenix, but we've been actually based in Chicago for like the last a little over 25 years. Although I have actually been living in Europe for the last 12 years. And I'm a teacher, so I moved to Berlin for a teaching position in 2009. And that's where I actually met my husband. He's Italian. And we got married and had our first baby in 2017, a little boy. And he's my oldest. And then we had another baby in 2019, a little girl. And yeah, at that point, we had both been in Berlin like 10 years, and we were just kind of ready for a change. And my husband surfs. So we were seeing that we were spending all of our vacation time traveling to surf spots. And we just fell in love with Portugal and decided, you know what, like, can we make this work? So I had actually the benefit of still being on extended maternity leave in Germany. So we had a bit of like safety cushion. So we decided to try like a 6-month trial here in Portugal. And just after we arrived, actually the pandemic started. So that was a year and a few months ago that we've been in Portugal ever since. So, and then a few months after that, I found out I was pregnant with my third. And so we had him in February, and yeah, we're still like, even though we've been here over a year, we still feel like we're kind of finding our feet and getting settled because of the pandemic, but we've grown our family as well.
Wow. So I can only imagine him being a surfer. Portugal is probably the perfect place for his surfing.
Yeah, it is. He's in absolute heaven.
Wow. So you moved right before the pandemic. Was it the springtime when did you move exactly to Portugal?
February 2020. So we had like one normal month before lockdowns started everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so lockdown started. Now you're trying to figure out life in Portugal during the pandemic and then soon finding out that you're pregnant. Oh my, you are definitely a brave woman.
Brave or crazy, or just the fates like had their own minds made up for us. When we first came to Portugal, we were in the Algarve, and we were in an apartment, but it was actually like 700 meters away from a beach. And so during lockdown, even though the beaches were closed, we had foot access to this local beach of ours. So we were able to actually be on this beautiful isolated beach all during the first lockdown, like of 2020. And then we didn't actually move up to the Lisbon area until June of last year. So it's been 1 year here.
Oh, that's awesome. So you almost had like your own
Yeah.
private beach during the lockdown.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing, actually.
And then we made plans to move, and like we came up and found our apartment during lockdown. And it was really hard for me to let go of that like isolated beach. It was such a special time for us. But then the lockdown started easing and the beach started kind of filling up with people. And I was like, all right, yeah, it wasn't going to always be this beautiful isolated beach.
I know.
It does get crowded.
Well, it's probably better that you're not there now that everything's reopened pretty much and, full
Yeah.
steam. So let's just kind of jump into the home birthing options. So you found out that you're pregnant. At that point, were you in the Algarve when you found out that you were pregnant, or did you had already moved up to Lisbon?
Oh, we just moved up here to Lisbon. We'd been here like 1 month.
Okay, so you found out that you were pregnant as you're moving to Lisbon. Like, why did you choose home birthing? Now, with the other two, were those two home birth?
They were in a hospital system in Germany. And I hadn't known people who had done home birth in Germany. I had a friend of mine who attempted it, but her midwife was actually sick the day that she went into labor, so she ended up having to go into hospital. And so I didn't actually know anyone that had done home birth, but it was more popular in Germany. And they also had the option of birthing centers. So I did know that Germany in general is more holistic in their birthing approaches. And so even though I had 2 hospital births, There was no intervention during my birth. There was no medication. And I also was really fortunate that both my births were quick births. And so after my first birth, he came in like 5 hours. And and because my second birth was only 18 months later, we were like, come on, that was great. We just do the exact same thing over again. We go to the same hospital. The midwife that was with us was amazing. We were all set. And then my second birth was actually extremely quick. It was just 1 hour and 10 minutes, I think, from the first contraction to holding her. And so I think like that transfer from home to the hospital was quite like, it felt quite urgent. And we joked with my midwife after that birth. I said, okay, so for the third, do I have to do a home birth? And she goes, it might be your safest bet. And I had actually wished with my second that I had done a home birth. And so I had kind of already made my mind up that if and when we had our third, that I would want a home birth. And that was before we had moved to Portugal.
So when you moved to Portugal, you realized then if you were going to get pregnant, you're going to have a home birth. And now you found out that you were pregnant. How hard was it to find resources that you needed in a new country during the pandemic, not knowing anybody? Was it hard to find like a doula or a midwife during that time frame?
I got lucky, but I mean, there were a few weeks there, and it was summertime, so it was hot. I was totally dealing with morning sickness, and I had 2 active toddlers on my hands, and so I really felt like I lived for their nap time every afternoon so that I could just like lay down. And I spent that entire time like researching, like, how do you find a doctor here? What does like giving birth in Portugal look like? And I just felt like my head was spinning because I didn't know anything. And it wasn't because we were still coming out of lockdown, there wasn't really this chance to be out meeting other people. And so any way I was meeting people was like in Facebook groups and, like, oh, like, do you recommend this doctor? And trying to figure out this private or public system. And yeah, my head was spinning totally. But I ended up being really lucky. Like I did meet a couple moms, and 2 of them were pregnant. One was pregnant with twins, and the other was pregnant with her second child. And she had done a home birth with her first, and she had planned to do a home birth now with her second. And so right away I was like, okay, so tell me more about that. Like, who's your midwife? And so she handed me the contact right away. I got in touch with her right away. And I just had a really good feel. Like, that was the first moment that I was like, okay, I feel good about this pregnancy. And I feel really good about this connection. So, yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad it worked out. In Portugal, is it really common to have your child in the home itself or a birthing center? Is that a thing?
In Portugal, I don't think they have birthing centers. I haven't heard anything about birthing centers, although I want to say that I've read like an article recently that they might start using birthing centers in Portugal, but I'm not sure about that. Home births are not that common. It seems like the people that I've met and circulated with, there's like quite a few of us, but I think that it's definitely more rare to do a home birth in Portugal. And even the doctors, like I was quite straightforward with the doctor I chose. And I said, look, I know that it's not a popular choice, and I know that you're probably not going to be supportive of the home birth, but this is my plan. And she was really good about working with me.
Now, did your doula perform all the prenatal exams, or did you have to go to a public or private hospital for those?
I did have to go to a hospital for my exams. I was in the private system because I'm still like a legal resident of Germany, and I wasn't able to get my residency in Portugal yet because of the pandemic. I was just using our private insurance. And so my OBGYN was at the private hospital. So I did go to her for my exams and my ultrasounds, but I also had my midwife. So I ended up like alternating that, like 1 month I'd see my gynecologist, and then the next month I'd see my midwife. And I think my gynecologist would have liked to see me more often, but I just spaced out my appointments a bit farther apart.
It's convenient. I think the pandemic kind of made everything really convenient when you have to FaceTime or Zoom or whatnot your doctors for any little questions. I know, like with my
Yeah.
pregnancies, I felt like I had to go to the hospital, or not the hospital, but my doctors, like every week and over, and they're just like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yep, everything's fine." Like, so it's nice just to be able
Yeah,
to.
and it was just inconvenient to have because I had to go into Lisbon and I just didn't bother if I didn't have to. And I did have like thankfully because I had the experience of 2 pregnancies under my belt, I did kind of know like what to expect and what was like necessary or what was a bit excessive
Right.
and this kind of thing. And because I was in the private system in Portugal, I think it's more common that they'll actually ask for more tests and more like they'll offer more ultrasounds than what's necessary. And so even though it was my third, there were a couple moments where I was like, oh my gosh, do you think I need to do that? And I called my midwife, like, do you think this is important? And she's like, what do you think? And she was always really good about like putting it up to me, but more often than not, I said, yeah, I don't think that I need to do that. And she goes, I think that you can go with your best instinct then. And so
Oh,
I managed both. I saw my midwife throughout the pregnancy, and I also saw my gynecologist.
oh, that's good. It's good that you had two different point of views, if in case you
Yeah.
wanted to listen to one or the other. Did you and your midwife have any backup plans in case something were to go wrong or not planned during the delivery?
Yeah, so well, first of all, so she was my main midwife, and then there was always going to be a backup midwife at the birth, so that there were at least 2 of them. And then I think like so if I was in birth and something went wrong, then they just call the ambulance and they take me to the nearest hospital. Whereas that's if you're in like active labor or right after labor. And then I think if you were like in the early stages of labor and something was going wrong, or if you were maybe not even yet in labor, but if like if you went over your 42 weeks, or if they were concerned about your blood pressure, there were different game plans. Like, okay, so if this happens, what hospital do you want to go to? And where do you feel comfortable? And like, where do we say stop? And so we had talked about all of that together. And I guess because I was confident that because I had had 2 good births already, we were trusting that my body was going to be able to go through this third birth, not with ease, but without too many complications. So we had talked about like backup plans, but we were pretty relaxed with it as well.
I think it's always easier with your third kid because in hindsight now with my third, I'm like, oh, I was like, yeah, whatever. Oh, I know this. Like you're just. I don't want to say you're a pro because it's not like you had like 100 kids, but it's definitely not
And it's
as.
always birth, like anything could happen, right? Like,
Yeah. Can you tell us how your experience of the home birth was from when you went into labor and how everything went?
when
Yeah.
yeah, I will say that because my second birth, because Kiva came so quickly, it took me a while to process her birth, because, which it sounds ridiculous because it was so fast. So I don't feel like I can complain about being like, but it was just an intense birth, and I don't think I had actually reached this mental stage of like I'm giving birth right now before she was actually in my arms. And so after her birth, I did a lot of just processing and reflecting on how that labor had gone. And I actually started to become really passionate about birth work. And I had already started to look at studying to be a doula, and I had been a part of mother circles, and I had done a lot of reading on birth. So that was like kind of post my second birth and through this pregnancy. And so I have to say that this birth was one of those births that you like read about where it was just really idyllic. Like I was never, I mean, of course it was painful, but I felt like so at peace through the entire birth. And so when the labor started, my 2 previous labors, when they started, I was in like full on contractions from the get-go, dilated like within 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, they were like very intense. And so this time we were at home. It was during full lockdown in February. My husband had just finished work for the day and are like back in the office. And we were just about to go out for our evening walk. And I think I was 4 days over it. I was 40 plus 4, 40 plus 4. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I think maybe I'm having a contraction. but I had never had like simple contractions before. So it took me a while to figure out like, yeah, I think these are contractions. And then finally I texted my midwives and said, okay, I think it's starting. It seems really relaxed, but it is coming and going, just to give you a heads up. And so then they had me start timing my contractions. Maybe after like 30 minutes in, they said, can you start timing your contractions for us? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I was trying to like time, how long and how much space was between. But I just felt so in control. And so then but I was still worried that like it could come on really fast because my other ones had. So about an hour in, I said, I think I'm going to tell the midwives to come. And I was still like cleaning the house. I was like going into that like super nesting mode, like making sure all the last things were done. And my husband kept going like, Megan, don't you just want to sit? And I was like, no, I feel really good right now. I just feel really like in control, like just let me do this. And so an hour in, I told the midwives to come, and they probably didn't arrive for another hour because we were in touch that whole time and I was really calm. And Tommy kept saying like, are you sure you're okay? Like you've never been like this before. You're really relaxed. I said like, I know. And I had set up in our spare room, which is also his office. That had been my birthing room that I had already prepared ahead of time. And so I had images from that like girlfriends had sent me and quotes that girlfriends had sent me, just to like kind of get into my birthing space. And I had started playing music. So I was really at peace. And when the midwives arrived, I was really worried that they were going to tell me, you're just at the start of labor. And so I said that to them, like, I'm so sorry that you've come so soon. I'm so afraid you're going to tell me that I've just started dilating. And they said to me, like, oh, but Megan, if you have just started dilating, that's okay. That's what we're here for. And I was like, okay. So, they laid me down, they checked me, and they said, do you want to know, like, can we check you? And I said, yeah, please. And they go, you're not at the start of labor. You're in the second half of labor. Like, you're well over the second half, however they said it. And they're like, you're doing really good. I said, okay, that's such a good relief. And they said, but you also seem like you're just in a really good place right now. So we're just going to leave you in this room and we're going to go out and out in the other room. And I said, okay. So yeah, I was just working through contractions. And then I think I went out to them because we talked about a water birth, and that was part of the home birth package, is that they were bringing the pool. And when we had planned the birth, we didn't know if there'd be time to set up the pool. But of course, because the birth was like going so calmly, I said, can we still do a water birth? And she goes, absolutely. Do you want me to set it up? I go, yeah, let's do that. So we blew up the pool back in this room. I was still like getting my kids ready for bed at this point, like putting pajamas on them. And I felt so good. And then, it was just at one point the contractions started to get a bit more intense. And I just looked at my midwives and they just go, okay. And they just started filling the water. I mean, there was really like such little talking. They filled the water up, and as the water was filling, they said, do you want to get in the water? We can let the water run over your back. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I got in the pool, sat there for a bit. Tommy was coming back, putting water over my back, and then he would go back to the kids. And then finally I said, I really need Tommy here now. And so he came back with me. We had a friend that lives around the corner that was going to come stay with the kids while I actually like gave birth. And so he goes, should I call Kelsey now? And I said, yeah, call Kelsey. She came like 15 minutes later. And then the baby came like 5 minutes later. It was really like, it was just so calm and so relaxed and peaceful.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like the most magical experience. Not like you just gave birth in a hospital per se, but it's kind of like, oh, I got to like clean the house a bit, got to walk around, got to organize a little, it's just like an everyday occurrence almost.
And I really reflect on it. Like, I don't know if it's because I had really mentally prepared for this calm birth, or if it's because I didn't have to do this transfer from home to the hospital. Like, I don't know what, but it was, I got my water birth, I got my calm birth. It was really good.
Sounds perfect.
And actually, when he was coming out, she had said, we didn't know if it was a boy or girl. And when the head was coming out, she said, okay, reach down and try and get the head so it doesn't come out too fast, and then, yeah, you know how often like the head comes out with one contraction and the body comes out on the next?
Mm-hmm.
And with him, the head was coming out, but it didn't come fully out on the contraction. So it was really painful in the break between contractions. And I remember like I was like, I can't relax right now. And then on the next contraction, the whole baby came out all together in one go. And she just goes, just reach down and get your baby, pick your baby out of the water. And that was just like the most amazing thing, to just lift this baby up and be like,
Yeah.
it's my baby.
Wow. I mean, did anything happen, would you say, that wasn't planned and you were kind of surprised about?
Hmm. I don't I don't think so. Afterward, like in the post birth, when you're waiting for the placenta, it took a bit of time for my placenta to come out. So I had stayed in the pool for a little bit, and I think we were hoping the placenta would just come while I was still in the water. And it didn't. So we had to get out, and then I had a bed set up. So I laid in the bed, and it was still taking a while for the placenta to come. And I think once it did, I still had like a bit of like heavy bleeding. So they did have to give me a shot of oxytocin to regulate that bleeding afterwards. But it was all pretty, I mean, they handled it really well. It was painful, the oxytocin, but it was in my leg, and I remember I was like, oh, and like, yeah, it hurts. I'm really sorry. We've both had it. Like, we know it hurts.
I love how you
But
said that
other than,
that's the part that was painful versus actually giving birth.
and I did actually need a couple stitches, and or one stitch, I guess. And I have needed a stitch with all of my births. I've had big babies every time, and in all honesty, that's like the part that I like the least about birth. That's like the thing that sticks with me the most, is the most painful moment is getting that stitch,
Yeah.
which is so ridiculous.
But was the actual overall experience everything you had imagined?
Like I think it was even better than I could have imagined, because I was really imagining like a little bit of chaos going on in my home, but like not having to leave the house. But I still thought it was going to be like I was still preparing for chaos.
I can't imagine what your neighbors probably thought. I don't know if you're typically a quiet birther or if you're, a louder birther or whatnot. But if you are the
I'm
latter,
typically a loud birther. Like with my first birth, I like that's how I found all my power, was like this like animalistic roar, and I loved it. Like I had never felt so wild and so strong. And so I was doing that in my second labor, but like my body had already done all the work. Like the baby was already ready to come out. And I was like holding her in because I was trying to get to this like animalistic place again. And the doctors were like, no, like you just take one big breath and then breathe it all out. And it's like, oh, and the baby just kind of came out. And so that was part of my like reflection. I was talking about it with the nice thing about this pregnancy is, while I had my meetings with my midwife, we were able to talk everything out. And so I had said that to her, like, I'm concerned about doing the home birth and like roaring like that in front of my kids. And I go, but in my second birth, I didn't need to roar. Like I wanted to, but my body had already done the work. And so that makes me think that maybe like the strength is already in me. And she had said, well, Meghan, you can't know how your body is going to birth until you are in that moment. And sometimes you do need to roar and sometimes you don't. But you do, she goes, I think it's smart to prepare your children for the fact that that could happen. And she goes, but you might not need to roar. And this time I didn't. I don't think I made, like my friend who had come over for the birth, she goes, at one point I heard you kind of go like, oh. And she goes, and then nothing. She goes, it was just silent. And then suddenly I heard a baby crying. So this time was a really quiet birth. So I don't think my neighbors heard anything. I think they just heard the new baby crying like that first night.
oh my gosh. It's like I
Yeah.
can't imagine being your neighbor and all of a sudden the next day I see you and now you have three kids. Like, wait, when did that happen? you know?
Actually, our neighbors did one night. They like knocked on the door, and I was like, I think someone's knocking at the door. And mind you that we've been in this apartment for, now it's been a year, but in February it wasn't a year yet. And we've never had anyone over because of stupid COVID. So the midwives coming to the house was like a really big experience because that was like the first people we had hosted in our house. And so when someone's knocking on the door, I was like, who is that? And it was the neighbors, and they were bringing over like a card and like a package of diapers. Aww. And my husband was like, how did you know we had the baby? And I'm like, oh, we can hear the baby crying.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, it was cute.
So I guess let's talk about the cost of everything. And I know it fell under your insurance and everything, but do you have an idea of how much giving birth at home would usually run in Portugal?
Yeah, so for my midwife package, it was a flat 2,000 euro fee that, I mean, I knew that when I agreed, you know, like the contract with her was straight up 2,000 euros, and that covers all of the meetings during pregnancy, the birth, all of the like medical supplies, and the postpartum visits. And that's not covered by Portuguese insurance. So anyone who decides to do a home birth, you're paying for that midwife out of your pocket. And I just got lucky because I'm still under my German insurance that I was able to submit. So we knew that straight up. And then it was during my pregnancy that I figured out like, oh, actually, I think I can submit that to my German insurance. So we had paid the 2,000 euro for the midwife, but then I was able to claim some of that back from my German insurance afterwards.
That's awesome.
But normally, yeah, it would just be 2,000.
So, but does that include all the exams like that you had to go to with the private hospitals or whatnot too? Or is that just?
No, so like at the private hospital, I only had to pay 15 euros for each exam as like a copay. But if you did it through the public hospital, you wouldn't have to pay for anything.
Right.
You could just do your visits. Yeah, they'd all be covered. So I think I paid 15 euro for my visits as a copay, and then I paid a little bit for my blood tests, and like also the ultrasound would have just been a 15 euro copay. And then like sometimes I comboed the ultrasound with my doctor visit, and then it would be like a random like 17.50 copay instead of just 15. And yeah, so it really wasn't bad. I think if I add it all up, I probably spent a couple hundred on all my copays. And
just to give you perspective, I guess with my first kid, and all of mine I had in the States with insurance, but my first kid, I think I paid $2,500 out of pocket. Well, that's with insurance. So it's crazy, you know, how affordable it can be if you wanted to go down that route.
I know.
So looking back now, was there anything that you would have done differently?
Differently. I don't know. I might, you know what? I like really tossed. I didn't have a doula. I only had my midwives, and I think that was fine. I don't think I needed a doula. I did think about having a birth photographer. And I might have gone back and had a birth photographer. And at the last minute, I thought about contacting somebody, but it was just odd because it was this pandemic time, and this like Portugal was on this pretty strict lockdown at the time. And so I do sometimes still wish I had that. But the reality is that like, because we were in this little spare room of ours and we had the pool set up, and I had 2 midwives and my husband and my 2 kids and our friend, I don't know if there would have been space for either a doula or a photographer in that room with us. It was pretty tight. Right. And so in the end, I did get some nice photos, and I'm happy with what we did. But yeah, I guess like if I was going to do birth again, then I might invest in a birth photographer.
So let's just say you got pregnant with a 4th kid, and at your rate, maybe it's next year. Who knows? Do you know which route you would want to go down with the 4th kid? Did you want to go down the traditional hospital route, or would you want to do another home birth?
I would do home birth in a heartbeat. And yeah, because you know what I said in the beginning, that I had this one friend in Germany that tried to do a home birth. With her first child, she was in a birthing center, and then she wanted to do home birth with her second. And I always thought like, oh, she's kind of crazy. Like, I'm really impressed that she wants to do that, but I don't think I could do that. And now I just look back and think like, oh, I wish somebody had pushed me more, or like, I wish I had read more about how amazing home births can be. I just don't think I knew enough. And now I've just read so much about about that route, and that I'm a really big advocate for home births. So yeah.
That's great. I mean, I think it's always, again, easier once you went down the traditional hospital route for your first one. And then once you have your second
Yeah.
and third, you're likely more to experiment with different alternative methods of giving birth. I think with the first kid, it's always harder because one, you don't know anything about giving birth in general, or how your body is even going to respond to birthing. But
Totally.
it's always admirable for those that can give birth anywhere in any place. But
And that's what I've said, like to some friends who have asked, I said, I totally support home birth. I go, but I also totally understand why you would want to go to a hospital.
yeah. Hi, you.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything else important about the home birth that I would recommend. No,
But you know,
I think
honestly,
it,
it's so nice that you're home and your kids are home too, so they can kind of like greet your youngest baby there. I think
yeah, it was a really special time. And it is, especially because we were in this lockdown. So like the alternative was going to be me going to hospital to give birth. And then maybe my husband would have been able to be in there for, like in Portugal at the time, they were letting the husbands come in when you were like 8 centimeters dilated and then staying through birth. And I think they could stay 1 or 2 hours up to 1 or 2 hours after birth. And then that was it. And some hospitals would let your husband like visit the next day. And then some hospitals were like, no, you cannot come back again until your wife is discharged or the mother's discharged. And that would have been hard. And because we would have had our two other ones at home, it would have just basically been like, okay, go off to have your baby and we'll see you in 3 days. And so I was really thankful that I didn't ever have to be separated and that I could crawl into my bed that night. And then the next morning, my little girl, she came and joined me in the bed right away. And it's really sweet.
Well, I'm sure lots of moms will appreciate hearing your story and your experience with home birthing in Portugal. I know I see that on the
Yeah.
forums a lot where people are like, has anyone here had a home birth here? And it's always interesting hearing from someone's perspective, especially with a great experience like yours. Hopefully every home births going forward be as magical as yours. Maybe they need I'm going to ask for your midwife information below so that people who are interested, they can contact her because she seems so
Absolutely.
perfect. Like she was probably made for that job.
I think she absolutely was made for that job. She's fantastic. And I don't know how many, because I found her kind of right away and I had a really good fit with her. I had found like a few other midwives, but I don't know how extensive the list of midwives are. Like I don't know how extensive that
Yeah.
list is. And so I think it's a growing profession though here. I think that there is more and more development around home births in Portugal. So,
Yeah.
and I also will say that the hospital system in Portugal, they do approach pregnancy as more of a medical, like more medical rather than just like, okay, she's going to give birth and let's support her. But I think they do react faster. Like I think they have a bit of a higher episiotomy rate and a higher cesarean rate. I mean, I know that the States also does, but so that made me more nervous as well because like the first time I saw a doctor, I was talking about how big my babies were, and he was like, "Oh, that's really dangerous." And I thought, "Well, it's not. Like I've done it twice, and it's been fine." But his reaction to me, I kind of thought like, "Yeah, okay, I don't think I'm going to be back at that doctor." And then I saw another doctor for my ultrasound, and she goes, "And how big were your other babies?" And I told her, and she goes, "But you didn't have vaginal births." And I said, "Yeah, I did." And she goes, "But with epidural." And I said, "No." And she looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, like, what? Like in Germany, that's like, they try and support that as much as possible. And it seemed like the Portuguese doctors thought I was crazy to try and attempt that.
To give people perspective, how big were your babies?
My first one was 9 pounds 8 ounces, and my second one was 9 pounds 5 ounces. So not massive, but like
Oh,
not small for your first baby.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's pretty average in the States. It's not like you had like a 12-pound baby, So,
No, they weren't 12 pounds, but they were like in Europe, it's all in kilos. So mine were all over 4 kilo. And I guess it would be more common to have like 3 to 3.5 kilos. Yeah, I think they were like 95th percentile, something like that.
But he seems so calm. Look at you. Oh my gosh. I love little baby hiccups. They're so cute.
They just grow out of it too fast, right?
I know. I look at my 3-year-old and I'm like, where has the time gone? I don't even know what happened.
No, and I must say that I was really lucky because then I had my time in bed and my time of healing, and then as Portugal started opening up again, it was just like my time to also start coming out of the house again. And so it's just been a really nice time to like start meeting moms and start watching our babies grow up together. So yeah.
I know, and it's great that your husband was able to work from home. It just seemed like I feel like those that have given birth during the whole pandemic was the absolute perfect time to give birth because you got to be able to stay home versus having this need to have to go to work or your husband not being home because he has to go to work or whatever the case is. It's nice to just like almost have the world stop so you get to enjoy that moment.
Yeah. I will say also that my husband, like at the last minute, he started kind of getting nervous about the home birth, and it annoyed me the first time he said it, and I was like, wait, where's that coming from? And he goes, well, I didn't think that we were going to be in this crazy lockdown when you gave birth at home. And I thought, yeah, but isn't that better that I don't have to go to hospital? But I think it was just his nerves. Like, I think he was just worried something was going to go wrong. And so I talked it out with my midwives, and they said, but Meghan, his only job in the other birth were to transfer you to the hospital and then just be there for support. And this time, he doesn't really know what his role is. And I said, yeah, you're right. And so, yeah, I think he was probably more thankful than everybody that it was a very smooth home birth.
Yeah, that's
Right?
good. Well, thank you so much, Meghan, for sharing your experiences with us. I'm sure lots of
Yeah,
moms
no
and
problem.